Good morning, peeps. What's going on? What's going on? What's going on, Will? Morning, everyone. Today's Thursday. We got Thursday night football. Week's almost over here. I know yesterday felt rather brutal, I think, for everyone. That was pretty much a little bit devastating in terms of the fact if you were on the wrong side of yesterday's price action, it was rather devastating. So hopefully everyone pretty much obeyed their stop loss. I think yesterday was pretty much one of those key days where if you know there's a catalyst ahead, you know there's a volatility event that's literally gonna whether it's gonna end up giving you at least 5 to 10% in terms of how volatile the price action is going to be. Yesterday was one of those days where you needed to have a stop profit or vice versa, a stop loss in place because you literally just got raped yesterday. And I would hope that you were not on the wrong side of that entire price action yesterday, but unfortunately, I know that there were a few. Unfortunately, emotions are pretty much the biggest factor in all of this right now. And I'm sure as we saw a lot of swift movement, we probably saw price action immediately off of the FOMC statement. We saw us go vertical to the upside. I'm sure there was a lot of traders that ended up jumping in, trying to chase the upside, just to get smacked right back down. And unfortunately, it was just based on the fact of what one comment was from Powell, in which case I believe they were basically asking him in the essence that was there going to be any kind of easing in future rate hikes, right? Was there going to basically be any kind of slowdown? And Powell basically indicated the fact that it was premature to basically state that because right now we are basically factoring that the rate hikes are going to be longer and they are going to be higher. And that was actually one of my major concerns in terms of not just the number that was going to come out, which was 75 basis points yesterday, but what was going to be the outlook of how many more rate hikes were to come and for how much, basically, how much higher, how much longer, in essence, right? What was going to be Powell's remarks on that statement or on that question? And they basically indicated that we were going for a worse than expected outlook because he didn't give the market any kind of ease in terms of saying, you know what, we're going to come back, we're going to maybe pause. There was no indication of any sort from that. All right. So that is pretty much what I wanted to get out of the way. Kind of just give you that, outside sentiment outlook. Of course, we saw the dollar spike off of that. We saw the bond yields, the 2 year, the 10 year. They all spiked off of that immediately. We saw this, we just went crashing. It literally was just a waterfall. I think within a second, we had already dropped about, what, 3, 4 points on SPY just instantly. So that's just discussing price action. But just kind of looking into futures, I'm not looking specifically at SPY this morning. I am looking directly at futures. I'm going to be looking for a critical support here sitting at 37.23. That's the major little potential dip by the dip spot for me that I'm looking at into the open here is 37.23. Be mindful that that 37.23 that I'm looking to potentially buy the dip at, it's very suspect to say that that bounce that I'm expecting at 37.23 is going to be meaningful or if it's going to be a major reversal. That's pretty much the big question mark right now. So 37.23, I will likely jump in to get into a position for the upside. And it may end up being a scalp, but I'm going to be looking to pretty much lock my profits in rather quickly. Look for that quick little 10-15% profits and likely be out until a better formation, better setup presents itself because we may end up just getting a little bit of a quick bounce off of that 37.23 level on futures I'm looking at, but then it may be so short-lived that we may end up even having a full trend day to the downside, in which case levels I'm watching to the downside, if we crack under 37.23, I'm watching 37.08, which you can call it 3700, and below that I'll be looking at 36.76 to the downside. All right, so those are the two key levels I'm watching to the downside. I don't anticipate that we end up getting lower than 36.76. I think that's the bottom end of even if we waterfall to where we should end up finding intraday support. Otherwise, again, like I mentioned about the buy the dip opportunity that's going to present itself at 37.23. Upside could potentially look at 37.43. And if we look more so for a bigger recovery going into kind of how we ended yesterday, I'm going to look towards 37.66. And top end of our upper range would be 37.82 roughly is what I'm looking at. So I'm just taking it level by level. If I do get in at 37.23, which I do plan to at the opening bell here, that's going to be where I potentially look for the quick profit, be in, be out. I think this is one of those kind of days where you don't try to hold longer than you should, just because of the fact that there's no set structure that says that we're going to either potentially hold up right now at that given support and for how long, or if we continue to just see a beautiful trend day to the downside. All right. And that's where my bigger question mark comes in. And so rather than kind of second guess myself and be in a position longer than I should, I'm going to play it off my level, look for the quick bounce, look for the quick little gain, and I'll rather be out until something else presents itself to a better degree. All right. So that's looking at futures, kind of just giving you my outline of what my game plan is for the day. I could probably look at a few other things here. Let's see if I can likely glance at, I can actually glance at Microsoft. One thing that actually caught my attention with Microsoft, I was gonna go out to the monthly it was that actually caught my attention. And if you actually notice something with the monthly on Microsoft, we're actually right at the 50 EMA off of the monthly chart here for Microsoft. So support is pretty much sitting at 217.78. We're roughly just about $2 above that. So I'm gonna look to see if there's any meaningful support at that 50 EMA here on Microsoft at 217.78. And let's see if we can play off of that back to the upside with the broader market showing any kind of reversal to the upside as well. All right. So again, playing it level by level, knowing these marquee levels that you expect to find some kind of short-term support at the very least. Look to see if you have any kind of short-term support at 217.78 on Microsoft with the perspective to the broader market, how it's actually moving. All right. So that's one that's going to actually be on my radar here this morning as well. Let's see what else we can pretty much take a look at. I believe Netflix is one that was a little bit on my radar as of yesterday. Not too much. I think it's a little bit more lower on my radar going into this morning, more so. But we did have a nice little ascending, broadening wedge action that took place on Netflix here off of the 4 hour. You can clearly see the breakdown of a trend line support from that broadening wedge. And we should come into support at 267 is what I'm looking at for Netflix. So another one that has about a $2.25 move to the downside. Let's see if we find meaningful support at 267. Look for the potential bounce. Let me actually see our EMAs here off of the daily for this one. So EMA support is kind of just around line with where my support is. You have the 20 EMA off of the daily here on Netflix, sitting at 268.87. And without a doubt, we can likely wick right into my support level at that 267 mark. All right. Hey, good morning. What's going on, my guy? So again, my Netflix is another one that's about $2 from its support level. Microsoft was another one that was $2 up from its support level, currently right now. So it does tell me we should see a little bit of a further downside into these support levels. Just looking at Netflix and Microsoft so far, and then we'll see exactly how that ends up being a reaction. All right. So those are kind of just two on my radar. I'll be honest with you though, more so, I'm actually more focused on looking at ES this morning. There's not too many specific names that I actually have on my radar. I am more so just interested in seeing whether we end up holding that support on futures at that 37.23 spot. As I'm looking back to see, exactly how price actions setting up into the opening bell here. I do want to see if we hold that 37.23 and for how long we hold it is my bigger question mark. That's what my real major concern is this morning because I don't want to get obviously it's all going to be contingent upon whether futures S&P 500 are we really going to see a meaningful support, meaningful reversal, or is this going to be so short-lived that the moment that you try to get into an individual taker to play the upside, you're going to end up getting pretty much stopped out and we're going to melt and likely end up even having a trend day to the downside. So that's my biggest concern. Just some other things to quickly highlight. Of course, we have an onslaught of data here this morning as well. So that's some things that are pretty much also on radar, along with looking at pretty much the broader market, S&P and futures. We do have ISM non-factoring data coming out with PMI roughly 9:45 to 10 o'clock this morning Eastern. So that's something that we're going to see how the market responds to that. We do have some bill auctions. We have a 4-week bill auction coming out around 11:30 a.m. this morning. So that's something that'll keep on the radar. One other thing that maybe could have some kind of movement in natural gas, but we do have some natural gas data coming out roughly around 10:30 as well. So that's something to keep an eye on. Tomorrow, those of you that are not aware, And this is the factor of where the market is actually still waiting on further data. If you remember me mentioning yesterday that you might end up seeing us trade within a range, and yesterday was more so we trended to the downside, but it was a very tight movement to the downside that we traded in, right? But we are actually waiting on job numbers tomorrow. So it is particularly possible that we end up getting into a support level here rather this morning, and then we trade within a range as the market kind of just feels a little bit of a consolidation. It's going to likely feel like distribution, in which most people are leaning towards the bear case, and we end up breaking down. But we could trade within a range, in which case the market's going to wait for job numbers tomorrow, and then we'll see a bigger and larger direction move on the back end of job data tomorrow. So that's something to also keep in mind, and that's why I think it's also another reason to pretty much keep your positions light as well, and not try to force your position size to go large, and more so trying to revenge trade for those of you that ended up taking a loss yesterday. All right. So that's something I just want to also bring to your attention, as I'm pretty much also game planning for that as well, to not pretty much hurt the bankroll. You want to be conservative, especially when you know that the market is still waiting on further economic data to come out. All right. But other than that, I would just say be safe today. Play trade smart today. Don't try to jump into something just blind. You're just saying that, you know what, I think the market's oversold, that I'm just going to jump into something blindly and the market has to go back up, or vice versa, just knowing the fact that we bled out so much yesterday that you're just going to force a situation. So let's see how we react. S&P futures 37.23. Let's see if we get a meaningful bounce and for how long it's going to particularly last. If we even get back over 37.43 for a resistance, or do we end up breaking below 37.23 and we come down towards 37.08? All right. I am looking a little bit also potentially, and this is structure wise. That's something that could be on the horizon. If we do end up finding a meaningful support, we find a meaningful reversal here this morning. And this is something that I'm also pretty much just on the radar here. We could be looking at a little bit of a tilted head and shoulders action here off of the 2 hour. It could be something of a possibility. It's very premature. We don't ever have a well-defined head for this entire head and shoulder structure to pretty much play out. But just looking at in terms of the bottom end of this little trend line support that I have, where we kind of got a nice little consolidation. My wicks aligned perfectly. We had the nice little support test, which we had a nice wick to the downside dating back towards the 27th of last month. And we had that strong reversal. That could be an indication of maybe we end up coming down even as low as around 3,700 flat. We wick to the downside, wick another trendline support, and that could be a signify our head for this potential head and shoulders pattern. In which case, we'll get a strong reversal off of 3,700. We'll see a nice bounce, and then we curl right back down going into next week. So that's just something that's premature right now. Keyword premature. It's just something that's on the radar for me. But 37.23, that's the big level I want to see if we hold this morning. And that's what the game plan is right now. We look to see how much more we end up holding that and play the levels above or below. All right. But other than that, I'm going to leave my stream up so you guys kind of see the structure, how it's going to play out here as we go into my support level. I'm going to actually jump in towards our standard voice for our members here. But I will leave my stream up for the next 15, 20 minutes or so you guys can actually see how the structure plays out and actually looking at my chart and my levels I have outlined. And you could pretty much use that as a little bit of a guide to your trade for the day. All right. But other than that, I will be on silent here for YouTube. If anything questions, or you can drop a comment or a question in the chat, and I will be happy to respond. All right. But other than that, hopefully you guys trade smart, trade light, and trade uh to be green today. All right. But you guys have a good one. All right, guys.